Hello, sixth graders. So this video is going to have two different parts to it because there are two different things that you're going to work on today while I'm not there. The expectation is that you should get done for sure with the first one and hopefully with the second one too, and if not, pretty close to being done with the second one. Part one is going to be a worksheet on igneous rocks as we're getting introduced to the first class of rock, and we're going to start with igneous rocks. So you're going to use your book to work on the igneous rock worksheet. You will be allowed to work with a partner for this one. So one person only. Cannot be a group of two or three, or I'm sorry, cannot be a group of 3 or 4. Just one person only if you want to. If you want to work by yourself, you can work by yourself. Each person, though, needs to complete the worksheet. So even though you're working with someone, you have to have your own worksheet because we're going to have a worksheet for each class of rock, and these are going to be important resources for you when it comes time for a review guide and study for a test. So that's part one, is working on the igneous rock worksheet. You get the worksheet by going up to the front table and grabbing one, and then getting one of the red books. Pages are listed for you on the worksheet. When you're done with that, come back to the computer and we'll talk about part two, which will be the introduction to our class notes. So go ahead, close your computer. You don't need it for this part. Find a partner if you want to. Go up and get a worksheet, get a book, and get done with the worksheet. When you're done with it, make sure you keep it for yourself. Do not turn it in. Do not turn it into the cell. So now that you're done with the igneous rock worksheet, it's time to go to our rock notes. So you're going to get this document that's literally just called Rock Notes 6H in Google Classroom. So go ahead and open up that doc and then come back to the video. Here at the video, or on this doc I should say rather, you'll notice there are 3 pages to these notes, a page per each class of rock. So today we're just working on igneous rock, so we're going to work on this page here. All right, the first thing is that we will do vocab at another time. So don't worry today about doing this chart. Don't delete it, but you're not filling it out today, so don't worry about that today. We're going to slide down underneath the table here. We're going to be looking at here, where we are talking about the notes, examples, which would be literally examples of the rock like granite or pumice or obsidian, and then characteristics that the rocks have. So these would be physical characteristics that help us with identification of the rocks. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to put the PowerPoint up. I'll flip back to make sure to show you where you should be putting in information and giving you a model of how to do it. But I'm going to go through the PowerPoint and talk about what it is that you should be writing in as we learn a little bit about igneous rocks. So let me switch over to the PowerPoint. Let's get started. All right, here we go. Rocks for Science 6H. Okay, so let's start with igneous rocks. And you are going to be copying down anything that is in red font. Okay, red font. So obviously the heading is not in red font, so you don't need to copy it down. You don't need to copy it down because I already have it for you right here. We are not doing anything with the box. The first thing that we are going to type from this slide are notes right here. And it literally tells you notes, copy down the red font from the PowerPoint. So how are you going to do it? Do it in bullet points. Okay, so let's start a bulleted list here. And let's go through it. So let's talk about how igneous rocks are formed. Igneous rocks are formed by the solidification, or another word for that is crystallization, of melted minerals. So, in other words, it's literally just the cooling of magma or lava. That's the fancy way of saying it right there. Okay, so this information, formed by solidification, crystallization of melted minerals, you should be typing that in right here. Okay. Oh, spelled it wrong. Okay. ... You guys write in the rest. Okay? If you need to pause the video at any time, just pause it if I'm moving too fast. Okay. Next. For the next bullet, you don't have to do the capitalization like I do it. I'm just kind of doing that to draw your attention to it here. So igneous rock is the main class. There are two subgroups, okay? And these subgroups are there because they form a little bit differently. And the way that they form differently is more about their location. It's where they form. So at the surface, so like above the ground, melted rock is called lava. And so when the lava hardens above the ground, we get extrusive igneous rocks. Extrusive igneous rocks usually are fine grain because they have small crystals or even no crystals that give them like a glassy texture. That's extrusive igneous rocks. The other subgroup is intrusive for igneous rocks, and it's beneath the surface. And so because it's beneath the surface, the melted material is now called magma, not lava, but it cools and it hardens. And these rocks usually are coarse grained because they have easily visible crystals and grains. You can usually see this easily visible crystal texture. That's for intrusive igneous rocks. So you have to remember these, but it's simple, right? Extrusive, like it's exiting the ground, so it's on the surface, it's above ground. That's extrusive. Intrusive, inside the earth, right? That makes sense. Now, let's talk about what you can't say for this. Sometimes kids get confused and they think, oh, intrusive, inside the earth, extrusive, outside the earth. Well, if you say outside the earth, it kind of sounds like these rocks are being formed out in outer space, which isn't true. So be careful. Extrusive just means out of the ground, right? It's above ground. Intrusive is below ground. You guys know from the layers of the earth that intrusive, when it's beneath the surface, that the temperature gets warmer. Well, if the temperature gets warmer, it should make sense to you then that these intrusive igneous rocks have large crystals and bigger grains that cause them to be coarse grained because it takes them a longer time to cool because it's a little bit more warm. So the magma takes longer to cool, thus allowing these crystals to grow, and so now the intrusive rocks will have this sparkling surface because you can see the grains, you can see the crystals. Extrusive, above the ground, well, the temperature difference between the air and the temperature of this melted lava is so great that it's going to cool quickly, and because it cools quickly, you get these tiny crystals or maybe even no crystals at all, and then you get glassy texture, right? Even some lava can cool in water. Well, that's even going to be cooler sometimes than the air itself, so it can cool so fast that you get these glassy type textures where there's no crystals. Okay? So small crystals because they cool quickly for extrusive, large crystals because they cool slower for intrusive. All right. Next, each class of rock will have 4 to 5 rocks that you guys will be responsible for knowing the name of the rock, knowing that it belongs to that class. So obviously these are all igneous rocks, and then also knowing which subgroup they belong to. So on your notes, we're going to a different section on this page. Okay, you just typed in those 3 bullet points right here under notes. Now we're under examples. And it reminds you to be sure to label the subgroup as well. So the first one is granite. It's not granite, it's granite. And I'm just going to put a little dash or a colon if you want to. I'm going to put intrusive because I need to know that it's intrusive. Okay? All right. You're going to keep doing that for the next couple of slides. So granite, intrusive. Here's some information about granite, but it's not in red. So you do not need to write this down. This is just some other information, but you're not going to be responsible to know this on a test. Okay? So granite is usually light colored, coarse grained, no real pattern with it. The minerals that make up quartz, you should recognize, or I'm sorry, that make up granite, you should recognize. We have quartz, which was number 1 from our mineral bag, feldspar, which was number 2, mica, which was number 3. Granite is a great construction material. You might have granite countertops in your home, right, for your kitchen or in your bathrooms. It's often used for buildings and monuments as well. It comes in lots of different colors because quartz, feldspar, and mica can all come in different colors as minerals, and so you get all kinds of different combinations, so it's easy to kind of do decorating with in terms of what colors you want in your kitchen or your bathroom with granite, and it's really, really durable. If you remember, quartz and feldspar were hard minerals, and so because that makes up a lot of granite and hornblende, which is also hard, mica's not, granite's hard. So it's a great material to use for countertops and things. Okay, underneath granite, new bullet, basalt. Okay, basalt or basalt. That one's kind of pronounced both ways. I'm going to pronounce it basalt. Basalt is extrusive. Okay. It's dark colored, it's fine grained because it cooled quickly. We usually see it when lava has erupted onto the surface. It's one of the most widespread igneous rocks because it's the ocean floor. We've talked about basalt before when we've talked about the ocean floor. Okay, so when we have seafloor spreading, that new material coming up, that's igneous rock, it's usually basalt. The third rock kind of has a funny name called Gabbro. Gabbro. It's intrusive. Okay? Because it's intrusive, it's going to be coarse grained. This picture isn't great because this is a dark color of Gabbro, but Gabbro is going to sparkle a little bit like the granite well. Okay? So you're going to see these crystals. It's going to have a little bit of a sparkling surface to it. I have some of these rocks. I'm going to show you guys examples when I'm back at school. Oh, everyone's favorite, obsidian. Obsidian is extrusive, and there's one other fact that I want you to type in there, and that it's the second bullet point here. Forms when lava cools very quickly. So on your dock, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. On your dock, when you type it in, you can then make to type in the other part here. Forms when lava cools very quickly. Okay. Sometimes obsidian is referred to as volcanic glass. It can be dark, but sometimes smaller, thinner pieces can actually appear to be clear, or at least translucent. It usually fractures along a curved surface. Because of that, it creates these sharp edges, and that would be a reason why obsidian was used by ancient civilizations for tools and weapons, such as spears, arrow points, knives, things like that, because it was a sharp points. If you look at the picture below the top one, you'll see snowflake obsidian, and that's usually just when there are some impurities in terms of the mineral content of the lava when it's cooling, or if it's cooling in water. Sometimes the water, there might be some impurities in the water that cause these little white specks or miscolored specks to show up for snowflake obsidian. Okay, obsidian's really cool, and it's very well known and easily recognizable. You guys probably, when you're seeing this right now, are already thinking about which one of those rocks in your rock samples for your labs is obsidian. You might have already knew it too. Pumice. Pumice, which is extrusive. And then after you type that in, there's a bullet point to write in about pumice. Okay, pumice has lots of air pockets in it. So it gives it this frothy look and feel. And frothy is kind of a funny word, but let me explain it. If you've ever had root beer, and the foam of a root beer. How it's kind of big and it's just really light. That's frothy. Okay, and that's the way to describe this rock, because there's all these holes in it, and it makes this rock really lightweight. Really lightweight. In fact, I'm sure many of you have heard, once you see that pumice is one of our rocks, that pumice is a rock that actually can float in water. Pumice can float in water. Its density is less than water because it's so light. So that's usually a good giveaway to identify pumice, is because of how light it is. Some of you might also recognize pumice. Pumice is used as a beauty product. You might say, wait a minute, how is a rock used for a beauty product? Well, it's used to help get rid of dead skin, like especially on people's feet. So I know it sounds gross, but like for when people go to get pedicures and things like that, to get some of the dead skin and to smooth out the bottom of their feet, they literally will run a pumice stone back and forth to get some of the dead skin off. That's called exfoliating, and it exfoliates and gets rid of some of that bad dead skin to smooth out the bottom of your feet. And that's usually used with pumice stones. Okay, let's go to the characteristics part now. So for the characteristics, all right, we are now moving down here. So go ahead and put a bullet. Now we're going to separate our characteristics based off of the two subgroups, intrusive and extrusive. So however you want to organize, it's up to you. I think maybe the easiest way to do it is to start with intrusive, and we'll do sub-bullets. And then go back after we type some stuff about intrusive, then you can go back to the regular bullet for extrusive and do sub-bullets for extrusive. Okay? Well, this is where we're going for characteristics. Now notice what it says here. It says characteristics, common in most, but not always. So the tricky thing with rock identification is that not every single one of these characteristics I'm going to mention is in every single one of these rocks. If those characteristics were in every single rock, it'd be really easy to identify, but it's not, because these are common characteristics, but it doesn't mean that it applies to every single rock and that every single rock has every single one of these characteristics. But the more that you see, the more confident you can be at your identification, knowing that it's probably an intrusive igneous rock or an extrusive igneous rock, because you're seeing 2 or 3 of the common characteristics in there. All right, so let's go back. Let's look at some of these. For intrusive, well, because it cools slowly, we see visible crystals. And because you have visible crystals, it usually creates a sparkling surface that's kind of like a random in pattern. There's no real specific pattern to it. Those are the 2 main common characteristics of igneous rocks, and they have them because of how they form. Because they take longer to cool, they give them the opportunity to have larger crystals, which are then going to create this sparkling surface. For extrusive igneous, it is lightweight, or can be lightweight, like we talked about with pumice. It can have a glassy appearance, like we talked about with obsidian. That's, again, because of its cooling time. It cools really rapidly, so there's not a chance for crystals to grow. It can have a bubbled or porous texture. Porous meaning holes. So we talked about that with pumice as well. There's holes usually in basalt. Think about lava before it cools and hardens. Think about how it kind of bubbles and stuff too, because it's so hot, because there's air in there, there's gases in there. So sometimes those gases are trapped in there, so it creates these holes to make to go into the rocks. Okay. So those are your characteristics for igneous rocks, specifically for intrusive and extrusive. All right. At this point, if you are done with the worksheet and you're done with your notes and there is still some time remaining, I'm not having you move on to something else, but you need to continue to stay silent so other people can work. So you have an option of either reading or doing something else on your computer that is school related. It is not free time. It's not game time. You can do something else that is school related, or always the best, another great option is just close your Chromebook and enjoy a little bit of time to read. I think that's always a nice thing to be able to do to kind of relax. Okay, I will be back hopefully on Wednesday, and I'll talk to you guys then. Have a good rest of your day.